we're at 5:33, so I'm inclined to get us started. I know it is a beautiful afternoon and we're competing with the good weather, but for those who have joined us, thank you very much for logging on to our discussion about legacy giving. I wanted to start today off first with a bit of a land acknowledgement. I think it's an important practice that's become quite commonplace, but I think that given the work of charitable giving, I think it's important to also acknowledge the place in which we're doing this work. And so I want to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the Toronto area, and Toronto is the dish with one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So thank you very much for joining us today. I am Tanya Rumble, and I'm working with Food for the Poor Canada and delighted to be the facilitator of today's panel discussion on legacy giving. I've got three incredible panelists that have so much to share with us, both as professionals, but also as donors themselves. Food for the Poor Canada, I want to give a little bit of background on who we are and what we do and the kind of impact that we strive to create each and every day in the Caribbean and Latin America. Food for the Poor Canada works in international relief and sustainable development, and we strive to empower communities in Latin America and the Caribbean through 5 areas of investment: food, housing, health, education, and livelihood. Food for the Poor Canada responds to urgent needs while building community and social infrastructure and utilizes pre-existing networks of local affiliated organizations to better sustain and grow the communities that we serve. We ship and distribute food, medicines, and educational supplies. We build villages, homes, and schools, provide scholarships, and of course support income-generating projects. We impact more lives with the donations that we receive by working with Canadian partners to source donated goods in kind that are desperately needed in the countries that we work in. And we also leverage the infrastructure and programming of our affiliated organizations that have been on the ground working there for over 30 years, allowing us to work effectively and efficiently. So a couple of notes before we get into our panel discussion. I want to just indicate that our panelists are speaking from their personal experience. They're not speaking on behalf of their organizations. And we will be talking about some of the technicalities of making or leaving a gift in your will. But we encourage you, of course, to seek your own independent advice with your advisors, be it your lawyer, estate planner, financial planner, insurance broker, and whoever else is important to making large financial and personal decisions. We also want to acknowledge that the pandemic has accelerated and has caused us all to, I think, confront our own mortality. And there's been an increase in the number of Canadians that have actually been establishing their wills or updating their estate plans. And so it feels like an opportune time to think about your legacy not just being about your children and your family, but also about the charities that you've supported throughout your life. And so Food for the Poor Canada is a member of the Willpower Campaign, a campaign that has been led by the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, who identified that the #1 reasons that Canadians are hesitant to leave a gift in their will is that they're worried about ensuring that they've supported their children and their loved ones. And we want to just encourage you to think about how you can also change the world with a charitable gift in your will and support those that you love and ensure that they're well taken care of. Your will is a powerful tool to create a legacy and to continue the good work that you've done throughout your life. So you are all on mute, but our chat box is open. Feel free to add any questions that you might have throughout the presentation, and I will ensure to weave those questions in either throughout the conversation, or we will have a session at the end for questions and answers. So with that, I'm going to first introduce Don Levy. Don Levy is the Managing Director, Portfolio Manager, and Senior Financial Advisor with Manulife Securities Incorporated, based in Oakville, Ontario. Don also identifies as a donor and a philanthropist. Thank you, Don, very much for being here today. And the first question I want to ask you is, What is your earliest memory with philanthropy, and what were the key influences that have inspired your philanthropy throughout your life?
Great, thank you very much, Tanya, and pleasure to be with you all. My earliest memory of philanthropic activities was I volunteered with an organization called Orbis, and Orbis had as at its mission the objective of eliminating global blindness. And so part of my role was to assist them in just various fundraising activities as a volunteer. And the organization operated by getting Canadian and American eye surgeon to volunteer their time to perform surgeries in many of the developing countries, and also to teach some of their strategies and skills, to impart some of those knowledge to local healthcare professions. The organization had a flying eye hospital. It relied on pilots to fly on their off time from United Airlines and Federal Express, and it also relied on various pharmaceutical companies to donate supplies and so forth. And on one occasion, we were in one of the developing countries, and one of the Canadian surgeon, I stopped to ask the question. His name was Dr. Brian Williams, and I said, "Tell me, you leave your medical practice for months at a time, and not knowing whether or not when you return, patients would be there. How do you manage, and why do you do it?" And at first his response was, it's a careful juggling act to try to, it's like keeping all of these various balls and hoping that none of them fall. But when I pressed him further, his response was very simple, but it was one that resonated very well with me. He said, "Don, at the end of the day, I want to ensure that I enjoy the sleep of the just." And that answer, was very inspiring to me. And it certainly was one that motivated me to have further involvement in various philanthropic activities.
Thank you for that, Don. I think that resonates probably with a lot of those who have joined our call today, that have an interest in supporting the work of Food for the Poor and other organizations that operate outside of Canada. And I think that idea of justice as a part of philanthropy, I think, is an important motivation, and also something that's been seen through the pandemic when thinking about global vaccine availability and things like that, have encouraged us to think more globally, I think, in a way that we previously had not done so. So thank you for sharing that memory. Audrey, I'm going to turn it to you and ask you the same question. And Audrey is board director, one of the longest standing board directors with Food for the Poor Canada, immigration lawyer, and partner with Fragomen Law based in the United States. So Audrey, thank you very much for being here. And if you wouldn't mind answering that same question, what is your earliest memory with philanthropy, and what were some of the key influences that have inspired your giving and your philanthropy over the years?
Thanks so much, Tanya, for the introduction, and thank you, Food for the Poor family. This is an honor to be talking about this this afternoon. And while I'm in the U.S. Presently, my heart is always with Food for the Poor Canada and the work that it does. So pleasure to be here. And to answer the question, I would have to say my earliest memory of philanthropy is really the reason why I'm involved with Food for the Poor Canada, because my earliest memory relates to my parents. Both my parents are Jamaican. They had left Jamaica when in the 1950s, like many folks did, to pursue educational and other opportunities off the island. So they had moved to the UK, moved to Canada, also moved to the US. And while my siblings and I were all born in the US, when I was about 3 years old, my dad wanted to go back to Jamaica and help to build up what was a post-independent Independence Jamaica, and he took an opportunity with the U.S. Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, and was one of 3 individuals who were sent by USAID to help build the first hospital in the western region of Jamaica. So that was Cornwall Regional Hospital, and we had the opportunity to live in Jamaica for 10 years, be a part of what I would say it was his donation of time and treasure and talent at a time when Montego Bay is not the resort laden place that it is now. It was certainly a place of a lot of need, and watching my parents do what they wanted to do to give back to Jamaica is, I think, what was my earliest memory, and really my what has influenced me the most around giving back and philanthropy. There's a lot of need as a professional in the legal field. I also see a lot of need in across no matter where you go and where you live. Students are always in need of help. You have clients who are in need of help, etc. But there's always a special place, I would say, in my heart, having observed what philanthropy means in the Caribbean and Jamaica particularly. And so that's what has influenced my decision, not only to give, again, time and talent to board service with Food for the Poor Canada, but then also look at contributing, whether it's emergency aid that happens on a very regular basis these days with climate change and global warming, but also with the ongoing projects that Food for the Poor has with school building, et cetera, and of course, legacy giving. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but that has led me to make some life decisions around leaving a legacy gift to Food for the Poor Canada, because I do want to sustain that legacy that has been left by my parents of giving back to Jamaica in particular and helping in educational funding as well for the future generations.
Thank you for that, Audrea. I think what you've highlighted is probably a story that resonates so deeply with all of us, is that our foundational memories around philanthropy and giving back, even if we didn't know it was philanthropy at the time, are often so deeply woven into our families' histories and our connections with the causes that were important to our parents and those individuals that were really important in our lives growing up. And so I think that it's only natural for us to weave those stories together in terms of how do you do this, of leaving a gift in your will, by also ensuring that those who have influenced your life so greatly are also taken care of, as well as other loved ones. So thank you for that. Debbie, I'm going to turn it now over to you. Debbie is also a donor, active community member, and certified financial planner with Desjardins Financial Security Investments. Debbie, how does this resonate for you? What is your earliest memory of philanthropy, and what are some of the things that have influenced you along the way?
Thank you so much, Tanya. Let me say I'm very happy to be here and be talking to you folks, and basically hearing a lot more about legacy giving, in addition to sharing my own thoughts as well. So let me just start by saying I grew up in Jamaica. Surprise, surprise. I was born in Canada, but did spend a lot of my younger years in Jamaica. So living in Jamaica as a child, I did see a lot of poverty, probably, as much as some of you folks as well. And then I came to Canada. So although I lived in better neighborhoods when I came to Canada, a part of what was with you in Jamaica still stays with you. So, that's sort of ingrained in me. So as I grew up here, I remember as a child, I was reading and hearing about people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Michael Lee Chin. And that resonated more with me because of his Jamaican ties. And so I looked at all they did and I thought, gee, you know what? These people are just like donating huge sums of money. And, I could never do anything like that. But as I got older, I realized that you don't need to be like them. You don't need to have those sums of money. You just need to have causes you believe in, and you need to have a big heart. We spend all of our time creating our family, making your house your home, and creating your place in your communities, right? And so as you do that, you find yourself, as I find myself, donating to charities, and not just in money, but in time as well, right? So I've sponsored local youth teams. I've helped build a basic school. I donate to universities and colleges, other charities as well, places like Inspire, talking about Indigenous. So Inspire, Sick Kids, Cancer Foundation, Cancer Society, all kinds of things like that. A lot of people do that, right? So I know the satisfying feeling that comes from making a difference. That's charitable giving, because you get back so much more than you give. One more thing, what I find is along life, once we define our values, our own values, and the causes that we want to support, and then you combine that with being sort of at the right stage of life, then it starts to come together. And then you start to think about, wow, maybe I can create a lasting legacy, something that is more than a $2 or a $250 donation, beyond our own generation even, right? And that's when it really starts to make a difference to me.
Well, thank you for that, Debbie. And I think you said something really, really poignant there in terms of you don't need to be Bill Gates. You don't need to be Michael Leachin in order to make an impact. And in fact, probably the gifts that you've made along your life have already made a significant impact. You just have to have an open heart and a desire to think about your legacy, to be someone that can make an impact regardless of your means. Because I think it can be really intimidating when we talk about legacy giving. It sometimes feels like a conversation that immediately gets siloed to those who have significant wealth, and the average person, it doesn't feel like they could actually make a gift that would have that sort of impact based on their means. So to that end, Debbie, I'm going to come right back to you. What are some of the most important gifts that you personally helped to facilitate, and why were they so important? Were they Bill Gates, or was it more of an average Canadian that you were helping?
So that's a good question. I have something very relative, actually recent conversation that I'll tell as well. So I work with people who either give their time or their money to support causes. It could be $2, $200, $2,000. Some people like to have their name on a plaque. Other people may say, I want to create a foundation. But regardless of what we choose, somewhere along the way, we're going to figure out how we want to be remembered, right? And so when you think about that, it always starts with family first and those close to you. Okay, so I had a conversation with one of my clients recently, and we were talking about estate planning and different decisions that had to be made. So I left her with something she needed to think about. And you know what, I did touch on charitable giving, but I didn't, I just sort of threw it out there and asked a question or two. And she's an accountant, so I was asking some, rhetorical tax questions. Anyway, as it happens, she did some thinking herself. And this afternoon, while I was hopping in my car to come back here for the call, I missed her call. So this afternoon, I called her back on my way walking to the car, actually, to the parking lot. And I said to her, okay, what's up? And she said to me, you know what, after our conversation, I was doing some thinking. And I said, yes. And she said, can you tell me what it would cost for me to get insurance for my 5 grandchildren? Okay, so now she's thinking beyond her and her husband, beyond her adult children, to now her grandchildren. Okay, so she is thinking, of course, she has enough for her. Her children are self-sufficient adult children in their own families, and she's now seeing that she can do something, leave a legacy, actually going to be for her great grandchildren by insuring her grandchildren. Okay, so she's thinking like this. So of course I'm going to help her out, and then once I have helped her with that, then she's going to start to think, okay, now how can I leave more of a legacy? Because she's totally looked after her family. And it can take years, literally. I mean, I deal with retirement planning. Someone in their 40s, 50s, not quite there yet, 60s, getting there, 70s, yeah, more likely, right? But even though it takes time, working with, for example, a good advisor who can definitely help put things into place, that's what everyone should have.
Thanks, Debbie. And going to a fellow advisor, Dawn, I'm going to come to you now. And could you layer on top of that, what are some of the practical ways? I know, and again, I'll give the disclaimer, you are not giving out personal financial advice. Everyone really should be speaking to their own independent advisors about their personal situation, because you don't have all the details about everyone's finances. But what are some of the practical ways that you can work with your clients to ensure that their family has been taken care of, and that they can also leave a gift in will to the causes that have been important throughout their lives?
Great question, Tanya. One of the things that I try to get across in my discussions with clients is, and I think Deborah touched upon it, is legacy. And on the question of legacy, one of the questions that I usually pose is, tell me about how much do you remember about your great grandmother? And often many individuals will say, you know what, not much. And I said, no doubt, your great grandmother was a fantastic person, a great parent, a great grandmother. However, probably her life was more a life of taking care of her family. It was a life of sustenance. And while that is very, very important, in order to be remembered, we have to go beyond the family. Into community, and that is where we end up, having a life of significance. And so once clients, can see that, can buy into that school of thought, the question of legacy becomes more important. And so from that, we can look at their overall financial plan and say, you have enough that you're going to be, be able to retire with the lifestyle that you want. Your core needs are going to be met. Your lifestyle needs are going to be met, and you're able to transfer wealth to the next generation. But how about instead of just stopping at the next generation, you adopt a child called charity, and think of a way that you too can live that life of significance, where you've broadened your impact, you have, in essence, expanded your territory beyond your family and your thought process. And in that discussion, clients start to think about causes that are passionate to them, and start to look at scenario and say, okay, what if, we look at giving X to a charity? What does that mean? And we're often able to show them, the tax benefits of doing that to their estate, and that, in some instances, their children end up with more. One of their favorite, causes, or several of their favorite causes end up with more, and they're able to reduce some of the tax burden of their estate in doing so. So that's one, way in which we've been able to facilitate that, discussion. Another way in which we've been able to do so is just looking at what individuals are doing, in terms of, they're donating, their existing donors, they donate cash. And in one instance that we looked at, recently, a client had a significant gain on an individual security. And we felt it was also time, in terms of looking at the intrinsic value of that security, that it was time, to realize some of those gains. And knowing that that client was already, passionate about certain causes, we looked at it and say, look at how much you typically contribute. And so I'll use this as an example. This isn't the actual numbers, but just for simplicity purposes, client that would be in a 50% tax bracket and would typically donate say $50,000, to charities, would typically get a tax credit equaling to about 50% of that. In this case, we're able to show this particular client who had invested $100,000 in a particular stock. It had doubled in what was a relatively short period of time. And so we were going to, liquidate that position. We were able to say, let us transfer 50,000 of that, to one of your, favorite charities. And so we were able to make a transfer in kind. And the benefit from the client, was actually greater from a tax perspective, because instead of $100,000 of capital gain and 50,000 of it being taxable, that 50,000 direct to the charity was not seen as a capital gain. So there was some immediate saving of capital gains taxes. In addition, the client also got the approximately 50% charitable tax credit. So there was a dual taxation benefit that the client realized. And so at the end of the day, the client was able to impact one of their causes, and their overall taxes was was less. And they were just enamored, at the same time at being able to save in two respects on taxes, and at the same time have an impact. So those are just some practical examples. I'll use one other example that I love to talk about, and I know Deborah already touched upon that, is the use of insurance. And one of the questions that I often pose to clients is, if you were to, throw a golf ball, just how far would you be able to throw it? And I'll get various answers depending on how strong that client feel they are. And then the next question I would say, what happens if you use a driver to hit that ball? How much further? And usually the distance magnifies significantly. I say, well, think of insurance as, as that driver that can magnify the impact, that you can have on your favorite causes. So if you're, able to donate X amount per year or per month, think of if you were to be able to use that to fund an insurance that can have a significant impact on a cause, and you've just now magnified, that, and that client become excited about, that. So those are some practical ways. Again, in all of those, one has to get, appropriate advice and make sure that it is right for each individual, and that one has looked at, not only the taxes, but also the impact on their own, financial plan in doing that.
Well, there's a lot of gold there. Thank you so much, Don. I think, again, as he said, please do seek out your own guidance, but there's some really practical guidance in terms of the kind of impact and the kind of widening of that impact through sensible financial planning, and a tax reduction for your estate and for your children ultimately as well. But I do want to go back to a comment that you made in terms of the life of your great grandmother, and I want to bring Audrey in. So for many of us on this call, we're either first generation or we're immigrants ourselves, and shaking that immigrant mentality of ensuring you've got enough resources for you, the next generation, can be a really difficult thing to do. And so giving is often done modestly, but always keeping an eye to ensure that there's significant resources in the what if instance. So Audrey, given that you are younger, you are a donor, you're a lawyer as well, and a first generation Canadian, how have you sort of reconciled this idea of like ensuring you've got enough resources for yourself and your own family's needs, but this idea of sort of going beyond those teachings and values that a lot of us have grown up with, to make sure that we've saved for that rainy day, and actually at such a young age be able to forecast into your future and think about your legacy and making a gift in will. I
love it, Tanya, that you refer to me as a younger person. I don't think that way much anymore, but I appreciate it. I guess just to when I think of again, giving, I think of it in three buckets, as I mentioned earlier on, which is time, talent, and treasure. And I think in the short term, a lot of us give our time, as you mentioned, as first generation immigrants, we all have probably grown up with some type of, either cultural or other organization that sort of helped us along the way, helped our families settle along the way. And we see that example, and we continue to give time in that way through organizations. Again, whether it's Food for the Poor or other professional organizations, I think we all have that spirit of wanting to give back. The talent piece, again, comes with, whatever profession you're in, you can help an organization as well by, giving your professional talent in some volunteerism that helps an organization in a way that they wouldn't otherwise have, and again, that's tied in with giving of your time. When it comes to treasure, I think that's where we struggle the most. Right, we talk a lot about giving time and talent, and that's easy for us to see and give in real time. But when it comes to treasure, yes, we are all very concerned with the daily means of how we support ourselves and our families, etc. And I sometimes jokingly say to my staff or others that I'm training, when I'm training people, I say, okay, we've learned this, but just pretend that I may not be here tomorrow. Pretend that, maybe I got hit by a bus on the way to work. What would you do with the things that we have talked about, or how would you address a certain issue? And I think that's kind of how I've looked at, planning for giving, is that we can't predict, what the future holds. And on any given day, we have no control over, what is left behind. So you have to look at things as from the perspective of ensuring, yes, that you always have enough for your daily sustenance and your family's needs and what they need for support. And when you get to that point of saying, yes, that I have planned that accordingly, it's always important then to say, well, what other things can I do to leave the world in a better place than I found it? And I guess that's been sort of my guiding principle around legacy giving. The other thing, and Don touched on this, is looking at, as we become older and we look at our parents and where they are in their lives, cycle, we then sometimes become the parents, and we become, we take charge of what they have done from a planning perspective. And I think we have a lot more tools and resources available to us than maybe our parents did, not necessarily everyone, but, to help with, as we try to plan for them, we have to take stock of our lives and say, have we planned, the right way for our lives as well? And I think that's really important, because one of the things that I found as I was planning for around what my parents would do as they got older, there are a lot of accumulation of assets, that families have. And I see this a lot, for example, in our community. You may have people who have been in Canada for 30, 40, 50 years and still have land in Jamaica that is really either non-productive or costing them money, or property elsewhere, other types of assets that they've kind of forgotten about. And finding ways to plan around the use of those assets, one, to take care of them in their older years, but two, again, to leave a legacy that's meaningful for them. Those are assets that I identify as being sometimes wasted in your lifetime, if you're not turning those or converting those into capital that can have a benefit from a charitable and a tax standpoint. For me as well, and again, I see this experience with so many people that I work with, being an immigration lawyer, as you move around the world or you move in jurisdictions, you forget about assets that are in some place, or you forget about those tax consequences that will come about. One of the things that has helped me with planning around, again, legacy given with Food for the Poor, was what would that tax consequence be of that time that I spent working in Canada? And now that I'm in the US, if I was to have those RRSPs, those TFSAs, all of those things, then, converted and transferred to the US, what does that mean from a tax consequence? Is there a better plan in place that makes sure that, maybe the government, which understandably needs money to provide services for all Canadians, but maybe there's something more that can be done from a tax planning perspective to make sure that there's a broader group of people that may be helped by those funds, but then having significant portions or percentages of those assets down the road, have a tax consequence that where most of it is going to the government, and not necessarily to where you want, your hard work to have gone. So again, I don't know what that looks like for everybody else, but those are things that certainly came to mind for me in terms of planning for the long term. What are your assets in your family and in your own, estate? Will that be treated over the long term? What are the tax consequences if you're not in a position of having planned for distribution of those assets in a way that will minimize the tax impact, so that you while you can't control anything from the grave and you can't take it with you, who can you best help in terms of what your key goals are by carefully planning and taking action on those assets sooner rather than later.
Thanks for that, Audria. Lots of great gems in there. And I think a lot of reminders about some of the assets that we acquire and our families acquire along the way that lay there latent and are not being adequately leveraged for our current needs or the needs of the causes and folks that are important to us. I think some really strong reminders there. I think of folks who are with employers that offer life insurance and other sort of group RSP plans that we often just don't even think about in our total picture of our assets and the resources available to us. And they sort of sit there and we don't do anything with them. So Debbie, I'm going to take it over to you. And I'd love to understand from your point of view, what are some of the best questions that your clients ask you and that you think that folks who are thinking about either updating their estate plan or developing a new, their first ever estate plan should be asking of their financial planner, and they should be thinking about as they're developing their own legacy?
What are some of the best questions? That's a good question. So if I were to actually ask you folks, what do you think is the most asked question when someone comes to you, a client comes to you and they're thinking about retirement? The number one question, there are two actually, but the number one question is, am I going to have enough? Right? And so the am I going to have enough starts the whole ball rolling. And it will look at all of the assets, for example, that Audria was talking about. And it will have the advisor or planner put together a plan of, for example, what are the different assets? How are they going to be taxed? How are they going to grow? What will they end up looking like at retirement age? And that's, of course, taking assumptions into consideration. And then it's not just accumulation, but it's decumulation. So you're building, and then a lot of investment managers, they will do the building, but they don't necessarily think about the decumulation part, the tax implications coming down the mountain, as I call it, right? And so coming down the mountain, it's too late to start over, right? If you've already got $1 million in your RRSP that's going to turn into RIF, that's 100% taxable, it's too late to say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should have stopped putting money into that 10 years ago. So that's why a good financial planner, for example, is going to ask all of these questions and look at everything and project forward. So you have some idea, given certain assumptions, of where this client is going to be and what the tax implications will be. And, you know, that's important because that will allow the clients to start thinking about, okay, I'm going to have enough. And okay, now what about my legacy? Sooner than later, right? Because it's what I call, a lot of people, they're afraid to look behind the curtain. So they might not have an advisor. Maybe they're in their 50s. They've been doing it on their own. Maybe they're in their 60s. Now they're really starting to wonder if they have enough, but they still haven't gone to an advisor. And I always tell people, you know what, better sooner than later. Wouldn't you rather look behind the curtain now while you still have time on your side to make any adjustments, to make any changes with some professional advice, rather than waiting until it's too late? So I had a friend who is a client, and we were having coffee, and one of his buddies came along. And then my friend introduced me, and he said, "Oh, you know what? I'm thinking of retiring in 5 years. I should come and see you then." And then my friend looked at him. I just smiled, and my friend looked at him and said, "What do you mean? You should go see her now." So, you know, at least he knows a little bit more about the overall process, because only then can you actually make sure you're planning correctly. And you know what? We don't control the markets. So in terms of investments, we don't control the returns, but we know that in the long run, the markets go up. And we know that asset diversification is key. And so, you know, when you talk to someone who has the bigger picture, who knows what you should have from both, you know, an insurance and an investment standpoint for tax purposes, for, you know, for protection, financial protection as you go through life, because you can be planning for retirement and saving your money as you go to work from job to job, and, you know, paying off your mortgage and so on, and raising your kids. But what if something happens to you? What if something happens to you one day and you're still there, but you can no longer work? Is your family protected? Right? So those are the sorts of things that we don't like to think about as an average person, but those are the sorts of things someone like Don or I, or your financial advisor, they're going to bring that to you, and they're going to make sure that you are okay regardless of what might happen along the way, because that's their job, right? And then it's also their job to make sure that as you go down that road, and as you're healthy, and as you get to those milestones, that you have what you need, and so that you don't have to worry about it, because that's their job, right? You don't have to worry about it. You know you're going to get to where you want to go. And then you can start thinking sooner than later about the legacy that you want to leave behind. And it can be done in many ways. So, you know, Don touched on it. You can do it using insurance. You can do it leaving something like your RIF behind, because, as I mentioned, 100% taxable. Okay, on first death, if you have a spouse, I have a spouse, if I pass away first, 100% of my RIF goes to him, no tax. Until he starts to pull it out, then he will pay 100% tax on 100% of it, and so on. But if I'm the surviving spouse and I've got a huge RIF, because not only do I have mine, I had his, and I don't need that much money, 100% is going to be taxed. And that's a lot of money to the government. If I were to say to you, you've got 3 choices and you pick 2. On, you know, when you're not here, who do you want to get your money? Your family, the government, or charity? Pick 2. Pick 2. Most people, I think, are going to pick their family first and charity second. Okay? And so to be able to make that happen, you've got a plan.
We got some great gems there, Debbie. I'm going to remember that. If you had to choose of these 3 options where your money goes at the time of your passing, your family, government, or charity, and you can only choose 2, I know which 2 I'm choosing. And I'm reminded also of Dawn's comment there that, like, you can adopt a child as a charity as a child and consider that as part of your legacy. So Dawn, I'm going to come to you now. I know we've been talking a lot about legacy, and you gave us a great illustration of how stocks and appreciated securities can reduce your taxable burden when they've gone up in value. What is some of the benefits of making a gift to charity of stocks now versus later? Because I think a lot of folks don't realize that they can actually gift their stocks to charities. Most charities accept them. And how do they do that? Do they sell them first, or do they gift them as stocks? Who sells them? How does that all get taken care of? And I kind of, it was a bit of a trick question, but you knew that.
That's okay. That's okay. Great question. And, you know, certainly there are significant benefit in seeing the impact of your you know, talents, or, you know, your treasures rather, going to work. And so when I pose that question to a client, One of that question is about your legacy when you're not here. But what about your impact while you're here? If you could cover both ends of it, would that be important to you? And most clients would say, yeah, you know what, that's important. I'd like to see, what is, happening. I'd like to make a difference now and also a difference later. And so the same principle applies when it comes to both, as Deborah touched upon, the two favorite choices, which are family and charity. Often when a client has got more than enough to sustain, their core needs and their lifestyle needs, and also their contingency needs, some of the question that often comes up is, you know what, I'd like to, do some gifting now. I would like to see, my children be able to buy that home, or my grandchildren be able to have that education paid for. And so in keeping with that discussion, I would say, great. Let's look at that, and look at what your financial plan can accommodate, and then throw that question in and say, okay, great. As you give monies to your kids or to your grandkids today, it also means that you're going to be increasing your income, because you're taking out more money, meaning you're realizing some capital gains today or some additional income today. That's great. Good to see that. Can we also bring that other child charity into the equation and say, great, how about having some impact today? And one of the added benefits of that is we can offset some of these taxes. Very simple scenario that we looked at with a particular client, as we were talking about that client giving out gifts today and so forth, and what it meant to their overall taxable income. Client looked at it and said, okay, great, yes, I do want to do this. I know it's going to mean that I'm going to pay about $10,000 more in taxes. But I'm not going to spend that money. And if I just simply leave it all, in the estate, the taxes are going to grow and so forth. So they ended up, leaving some stocks, or giving some stocks to their children and grandchildren. And I say, well, okay, great. You're going to have a $10,000 tax liability, but there's something you haven't thought about also. You're going to be passing up, having clawback of your old age security, full clawback. So, add that to the mix, and now we're talking about close to, between you both, an overall impact of somewhere, to the tune of about $24,000, both of you, being clawed back. What if we now, look at a gift today that can also offset some of those taxes? And they say, wow, we are going to be, giving that money either way. And I said, yes, think of every time you think of a dollar, think of it for your needs, and also think of it as also part of social your social capital. You're going to have a social capital, whether you give it in taxes and the government decides how they spend some of it, and some of it is earmarked for whether that be aid or different social programs. You are participating, but would you like to be, the one driving the decision on the organization? And 10 out of 10 times the client will say, I want to make that decision. I say, well, then let's talk about your causes, and we can see capital today going to your kids and grandkids, and we can see some going to your charity, and you're going to be fine in doing that. So that's one of the ways in which we can facilitate that gift. Today, clients love to see the impact or the joy of giving to their kids and grandkids. Wrapping charity into that mix too, as one of that child that they've adopted, and they can see the impact is fantastic. I'll give you one example. In terms of the scenario, we encouraged, and the client actually took a trip, to Africa, to one of the villages that they were supporting, and seeing the situation and seeing some of the work that was being done. They were just, I like to put it that way, that as great as the benefit were, to the end recipient, the children, the benefit to the client was even greater, because they were just elated and lifted to a higher places and being able to see the impact that they're doing. And those are some of the things that, can happen when one gives, now.
Thanks for that, Dawn. Lots of gems there as well. I'm going to turn it back to Audria for one final question before we each of you wrap up with final thoughts. But Audria, I just wanted to ask, as someone that has left a gift in their will to charity and spoken openly about it, two questions, I guess. One, were there any surprises along the way in terms of that process for you, in terms of creating that estate plan? And then two, why did you choose to tell the charity? We know that you're a board director and longtime volunteer with Food for the Poor, and we're one of the grateful beneficiaries of your estate gift. However, like, a lot of people are very nervous about sharing with charities that they've left them their will, even sharing with their children or other loved ones, because they can always change their mind. So tell us a little bit about why you chose to let those that you have left gifts for in your will know about it now. And were there any surprises in the planning process that you experienced?
No surprises. I think, again, you called me younger earlier, so maybe I have a different thought process. But I do, again, as a progeny of Jamaicans, I have always found it somewhat disturbing that we don't talk enough about our long-term goals and what it is that we are doing for our families and for each other. And I will venture to say that there's probably not a single person on this call who has not had a discussion, with friends or family about somebody in their circle or network who, when somebody passed, there was, a family dispute, a family argument, some type of what we would say susu about what they did or didn't do right before they left. And it has always kind of been a source of consternation for me, because I think if we don't talk openly about some of these things, then, we leave behind when we go, and we don't know whenever that will be, just a lot of issues for other people to second guess and to have unnecessary, debates about. You've seen it in whether it's on television or anywhere else, the unending, dispute about, somebody's estate when they have passed. So I think it's important to talk about these things. Identified. I think, everyone also understands that circumstances may change. We have gone through a significant economic disruptor for the generations with COVID, this past year. And I think, organizations or individuals know, yeah, something may change and we may have setbacks, which may require us to make some changes. But if for example, something happened to any one of us during COVID, and you were at a place where, you wanted certain things to have happened and you didn't get to deliver on that, the only way you can really make sure that that happens is through your will or through estate planning. And again, one of the things, I've talked about just, how our folks in general have moved around so much. One of the things that I learned in terms of estate planning was the importance of having wills in various jurisdictions. Because again, as we, grow up with Caribbean legacy, you may have property or land in one place and property or land in some place, and you worked somewhere for 10 years and, you accumulated a pension or something else there. It's always important to let those, folks who may be responsible for decisions after you're gone know where those things are and what they are and what they're intended to do or serve after you're gone. So I think it's really important to talk about it, to be upfront about it. And quite frankly, when organizations ask, then they should know, what they can count on and rely on in the future. And I think that's important for organizations to know as well, that, that there is, legacy that they can rely on. One of the things I'll just say, I know time is going, is, I have not heard talk of Jamaica so much except in the last 24-hour news cycle with the passing of Colin Powell, who, a proud progeny of Jamaica. And I would venture to say, with all of the things that I've been reading and hearing about Colin Powell over the last 24 hours, that I doubt he had a single regret in terms of where he, established his reach in terms of what he was preparing young people for, professionals, for people in public service, et cetera. He did all of those things and planned in his lifetime to make sure that people were, the people who had those opportunities to benefit from, like he did growing up, or after his family moved to Jamaica and from Jamaica. And so, to me, that's a huge example of all the things that he did to set up young people for future public service and diplomacy, et cetera, and education, that we should all take a lesson from, and be willing to think about what that means. Because it's one thing for us to see, poverty on the TV and people to read about, what's happening in or home countries on a website, in the newspaper. But if there's some small thing that you can do to plan for that to be alleviated in the future, then, I think we can all have some type of peace in our lifetimes, as we get older and feel that we've done our part, right?
Thanks for that, Audrea. Beautiful example of a legacy that's being remembered, and a reminder of how we all want to be remembered, and to do that planning now and not wait until it's too late. Debbie and Dawn. Debbie, I'll start with you. Quick last word, anything that you want people to leave with, think about, or a call to action for the folks that are on the call today.
You know what, a call to action, I think for all of us, we go through stages in life. And as I said before, we're not necessarily ready today to leave a legacy gift, but we will reach that point in time where our children, we're satisfied, we're okay, we're satisfied our kids are okay, or, your kids say, Mom, I don't need any of your money, it's okay. Great. Now what do I do with all this money I thought I've been saving to make sure you're going to be okay? So then it becomes, all right, well, they don't need our money. What are we going to do with it? Right. And then you start to think, you start to look around at the causes that are near and dear to you. And you don't make a split decision overnight. It'll take years. You have years. Right. But it's something in the back of your mind. Every time you talk to your financial planner, every time you talk to your accountant, you think now, family, charity, government. Okay, I heard that. Let me see what I can do more for charity than the government. And if we're always thinking like that, not necessarily doing right away, but always thinking, because it's a question of, how do you want to be remembered, right? You've got enough. What legacy do you want to leave behind? And your generations that are going to come after you. What I would like to do is I would like to leave something, not just from me, but I'm thinking more in terms of, for example, a donor advised foundation, right? So it's a sum of money that you basically invest, let's say minimum $10,000. So not a private foundation. I'm not the Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, but you can do something similar on a very small scale. When I say very small, I am saying you can start with $10,000 and you'll get the tax receipt for the $10,000 and you invest that money. And then every year after that, you can donate 4%, 10%, of that money to different causes. And it's a legacy because you will keep donating after you're gone, because I can say, okay, I want my sons to decide when I'm not here. My sons are going to decide what charities get the money, right? But that is money that is put aside, and it is going to be donated forever until they decide to donate 100% of it, and then it's done, right? So to me, that would be something nice to leave behind. So, you know, I start it when I'm alive and I make the decisions with my kids. We have to decide what to call it, because I confirmed that once I name it, I can't change it. So we have to, you know, have some discussion, come up with a name that's going to stick. And then, you know what? It's priceless. It's something, you know, you enjoy. It means something to you when you're alive, and it will have a lasting legacy when you're gone.
Beautiful. Couldn't have said it better. Thanks, Debbie. And Dawn, final word over to you. Any last words or pearls of wisdom? You've given us a lot already. In terms of those who are thinking about their legacy, they're considering a gift in will, they've thought about it before, or they've maybe already established one but never told the charities that they have left in their will. What advice would you give?
The advice that I would always give to clients, and one of the things that I say to everyone is, you know, think of it, you know, when you're leaving money behind, you're leaving a gift, and that gift is going to be often for your loved one, you know, but do you want it to be just a gift or an ultimate gift? Meaning the impact of it is going to be broad. It's going to be well beyond your family. Your reach is going to be great. That's, you know, how, you know, you build significance. That's how, you know, how legacies are formed. And when individuals think about that, you know, that resonate well with them. And the other point, you know, adding to what Deborah said, every single client, no matter how much they have, their burning question is, do I have enough? And often when we put together all of the client assets, most clients realize that they are indeed, to borrow from, you know, Scotia, richer than they think. They have more, you know, than they need in many instances. And once that is the case, we can talk to them about the idea of the gift to our loved one and the ultimate gift, you know, to our local, national, or global, you know, community. And, you know, that, you know, is how you write your history.
Great gems there. Thank you, Debbie, for all of the insights that you've given us. And I think we're going to all walk away remembering we've got 3 stakeholders that we can leave money to, and we want to try and do our best to leave the maximum amount to 2 of them, being charity and our family, not the government. Audrea, you've given us such beautiful insights of your own personal journey as a daughter of immigrants, considering your legacy at a young age. Yes, I said young. And also considering all the assets and things that we accumulate through our life, and making sure that we take stock of those and think about how they can make maximum impact, particularly if they're assets and resources that we're not really using. And Dawn, you've given us some really great illustrations of the tax benefits of gifting stocks, gifting insurance, and thinking about your RIF and other tools that you can use with your financial planner to reduce your tax burden, but also to think about the kind of long-lasting legacy and leaving ultimate gifts to the people and causes you care about. So with that, I'm going to say a big thank you to our panelists for a really engaging conversation. And now I'm going to open it up for any, actually, sorry, I'm turning it over to Sam first, and then we'll do questions and any other reflections from our audience members. Sam, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to say thank you so much to each of the participants, to Audrey and Deborah and Dawn, as well as Tanya for facilitating. I want to thank everyone who joined us. We really appreciate your being here, and I would love to open up the floor, and I think we can let people just unmute and ask questions, I think, if you want, because I think that it's not a huge crowd. So if anybody is interested, you can unmute yourself and just either say hi and say how much you enjoyed it, or ask a question. Yeah. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question? And if not, I'm going to pick on somebody.
Sam.
Hi, Jean.
Mine is a comment. I want to say how impressed I am by these young faces in front of me.
Aren't they young?
Someone said to me the other day, which was something that pulled me back, said, you have more miles behind you than you have ahead of you. And I think that as we think what is ahead and what is behind, and I listened to the presenters today, I can think of so many instances where I have either had to mediate family disputes, and where, I have seen real difficulties as families try to, to cope with what's there, because there was either no power of attorney, no will left, no designation of whatever. And so the issue that we're talking about today, I think we have to begin to see how we could widen that discussion so that people know. My sister is really ill at this point in time, and I know we wanted to talk about stuff, but no way she wants to talk about, anytime you talk about will or you talk about anything like that, it was as though you want me to die.
That's it. That's it.
So
No,
this is a discussion we need to have, not only in terms of the legacy, but in terms of how we prepare for that time in our lives when we have these tough decisions to make, and where we don't want family to be squabbling after we've passed on.
yeah.
I like the idea of the financial planner. I have been dealing with banks, the financial planners at the banks, and I often think that the best advice is really not there. So some of the things I heard today, I'll try to implement. So if you ever call any of you from me, know that the questions I have, it's come from how I can do something outside of an institutional setting per se.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your kind.
No, and Jean, I just want to say thank you. If all of you don't know, I'm sure all of you do, but Jean Augustine has left her legacy already. She was one of the founders of the BBPA, and she was were you the lieutenant governor or something? Jean, you have to tell me. What was your title in New Brunswick?
No. No, I know we all look alike, but
Oh no! Oh my goodness, Jean, don't say that. Am I remembering wrong?
New Brunswick. I have never lived in New Brunswick.
You never lived in New Brunswick. Okay.
I was a fairness commissioner for the province of Ontario.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was also the first African Canadian woman elected to the Parliament of Canada, and was minister and secretary of state and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, but not in New Brunswick.
Yeah, no. My legacy really, I hope, would be the Jean Augustine Chair in Education at York University.
That's right.
Because we're trying to establish ourselves as something for the community in an institution like a university, so that we can see a chair. As we walk through all the 90-something or more universities in the country, there's nothing that speak to us. Mm-hmm. So that's where, I want to see things happen, and where I want to see my legacy and whatever, whatever pennies I have after I'm passed on.
No, I think it makes a huge difference, and I think it's great to make an impact, as now with your time and your talent, as well as your treasure. And so really appreciate all the work that you have done. for the Caribbean diaspora, as well as, you know, for Canadians in general. So, is there anyone else who has a question? Cecil, I think you're the only person that I can see on a video, so I think I should ask you.
No, I don't have any questions, but it was a great presentation. And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And I appreciate everyone's time. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I was curious a bit about the recent Willpower Campaign that has been happening in Canada, and just curious to hear a little bit more about it, because I know we were, it was one of the logos that we identified on our program, and have been hearing a little bit about it more, but I wonder if that would be a benefit for folks to hear more about.
Sure. Tanya?
Sure. Thanks, Audria. I got a question too. The Willpower Campaign is the campaign for that's been led by the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. The Canadian Association of Gift Planners has done a lot of research and found that the #1 reason that Canadians are hesitant about leaving a gift in will to a charitable cause is that they're worried about supporting and ensuring that they've left enough for their family and their children. And so the Willpower Campaign is really designed to encourage Canadians to think about, you know, how much do they need in order to take care of themselves and their children and other loved ones, and that they can also leave a gift in will to the charitable causes that they've supported through their lifetime, and it won't take away from their ability to support their family. So Josh has added there in the chat the link to the Willpower page. One of the great tools on that website is a legacy calculator that allows you to do some fairly simple financial calculations to determine how much you might have in your assets and in your estate to actually leave to charity. You could find both on the website information about advisors that are in your community that can help you with your estate plan, and charities that are designed and have the sophistication to accept estate gifts and other gifts of securities, insurance, and RRSPs and RIFs. So Food for the Poor is a charitable partner of the Willpower Campaign, and you can find out more at willpower.ca or the link in the website. And it's a great tool. Just doing that financial calculation, I think, is a good reminder of like, how much do we actually need to take care of ourselves? It's not intended to replace the conversation you'd have with a professional financial advisor and have the kind of detailed conversations about your estate that Debbie and Dawn were alluding to, but it gives you a sense, and without the pressure, you can do it on your own to just do a little bit of back of the napkin calculation and to start thinking about what that legacy gift might look like, could look like. Oh, sorry. Little guy in the background.
Are there any more questions?
Hi there. This is Alex speaking. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. It was a great event, very informative. And I just had a question that I wanted to ask, because a lot of you have a lot of experience in the industry. So just doing reading, it seems like a lot of Canadians don't have up-to-date wills, and quite a few of them haven't done them anyways. So I know that with insurance, you can set beneficiaries for people, and I know as far as the average person might be thinking, like that might be, you know, enough. You know, they're probably just thinking about paying any estate taxes, and then of course leaving, you know, an extra bit of money for their children. But something that I wanted, you know, to know a little bit better is what are some of the things that a will does for a family if they might already have insurance, but they haven't updated a will, and you'd want to give them some reasons to update their will.
We've got Alex talking about probate and non-probate, and Alex, you sound like you've done some good reading. I'm going to throw it to Dawn or Debbie for that one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just start off quickly by saying the will is essentially your stating what your wishes are. And if you don't speak for, I usually say to individuals, if you don't speak for yourself, then you may have the court speaking for you. And, you know, so goes back to what do you want to do? How do you want your assets to be divided? What are your wishes? What are your goals? In your assets, in the division of your assets, and that's really what the will does. It will a life insurance beneficiary will only address that individual insurance policy. It won't address other assets. So there are some vehicles, an insurance, an RRSP or RIF, and even a tax-free savings account that allows you to leave named beneficiaries. And so that is one part of it. But there are many other assets that don't allow you to leave a beneficiary. So again, you take a couple. One of their biggest asset may be their home. What happens on the at the death of the second couple? How do their the value of their home gets divided, or other assets outside of RRSP or TFSA, and other things of value they may have. And that's really what will addresses and make for efficient distribution of the asset. It also appoints an executor. Who would you like to be able to handle the distribution of your assets? It can provide for minor children. It can establish trust, because you may not necessarily you may have a loved one that you want to care for, but maybe you don't want to put money in their hands. Maybe you want somebody to oversee that money, who is going to be a trustee. So, in accumulating assets, we often have goals and plans, but at the same time, at the end of our lives, we do have to have a plan, a written one, and that's what that will does. In order for assets to be distributed in a fashion that is consistent with their wishes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Can I just add one or two more things to what Don said? The question of, do you have a will? Or let me say, do you have an updated will? With every client I take, that is definitely not just one of the first questions I ask, but it is a question I ask over and over again, because I can tell you the obvious, most common answer when I say, do you have an updated will? Very, very nonchalantly, the answer is usually, oh, no, I don't think so. It's been a long time, or I've never done one, but it's on my list. And so I can't make people, advisors can't make you do anything. So the next year or the next second or third year when so how's it going? Oh, all is good. Okay. Did you look into updating your will? Oh, it's on my list. I know I should do it. I'll get to it. Okay, so it is very, very important, especially if you have minor children. Okay, very important. You don't realize it until it's too late, or until something happens to someone and you think, oh, I better do that before that becomes me. So it is very important. Another thing to realize is powers of attorney. It is very important to have powers of attorney for finance and for personal care in case something happens to you. What a lot of people don't realize is that should something happen and you pass away, those power of attorneys stop. They're no longer valid. Instead, it's your executor, it's your will. So I have talked to people who think, you know what, yeah, I have a POA, or someone passes away and the person with the POA says, oh, but I have this. And they're told that's not valid anymore because that person is no longer alive, right? And so now where's the will? The other thing a lot of people don't realize is Your spouse does not get everything you own when you die. I know people who think that, oh, well, no, I don't need one because my spouse is just going to get everything. It doesn't happen like that. If you have children, it is divided. So I believe the number changed, but the spouse used to get 200,000. I think it increased to 300,000. And then the rest of it is divided up between spouse and children. So depending on what you want to happen, for example, a blended marriage, a divorce, stepchildren, there are so many things. And if you have assets, you can't begin to imagine what could possibly happen if you don't plan for it to happen the way you want it to unfold. The other thing I will say, and then I'll stop, you may have a will because you think you want things to happen a certain way. As you get older, you will change. Your thoughts will change. For example, you may have thought in your 30s and 40s, I did my will and I'm going to control the money so that if my spouse remarries, we're going to make sure these things happen. But then as you get older, 60s, 50s, 60s, going towards 70, you're still happily married. You know what? You think, you know what? It doesn't matter. When I'm not here, I'm not here. They can have my money. They can do whatever they want. So maybe that's the case. Maybe that's not the case. But what I'm saying is the will should be revisited from time to time when things happen, life changes, when your thoughts, when what you want changes, make sure it's properly reflected in your will properly.
So much good advice, free advice, but remember, it's not advice for your personal circumstance. We encourage you as a call to action to think broadly about your legacy, all of the things that encompass your legacy. It's not just about your family. It's about all the things that are important to you, your faith, your charities that you've supported, political affiliations, all the things that have gone on, that have been part of your life's journey, and ensuring that you have a plan to execute that when you're no longer there, and to ensure that the impact that you want to create is done with the kind of intention that you've done throughout your life. So we encourage you to think about how charity is part of that, to visit the Willpower website, to use the legacy calculator, to do a bit of a rough calculation about what a legacy gift to charity might look like, and to do a little bit of investigating into the charities that are important to you. We hope Food for the Poor is part of that, and to think about how you might establish a legacy gift, whether it's a scholarship or a fund that will be used for particular purposes throughout the years. Start to think about that, ask questions, and we all know that our minds may change, our wills may change throughout our life, and that's okay, but planning is important. So thank you so much, Audria, Debbie, and Dawn, for your pearls of wisdom and sharing from your very personal experiences with clients and yourself, what it might mean to leave a gift in will, to leave a legacy, and to think about the kinds of planning that you need to do to ensure that that legacy meets the kind of expectations that you're thinking of now, and well into the future. We will have a survey that Josh has just added in the chat. If you could give us just 2 minutes of your time to give a little bit of feedback on tonight's event, and we'll also send a follow-up email with a link to the recording, as well as some legacy links and documents that you can use, file away when the time is right. When you get to your estate planning a meeting or you visit your lawyer, bring those things with you as part of that conversation. So thank you all for your time. We wish everyone a very good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. And Audrey, did you have one last word?
I'll have one last word in that we don't always have to think long term. We can think short term too. So one of the things that we are going to be doing for Food for the Poor Canada in the new year, we will be getting back finally to building one of our basic schools in Jamaica. Actually, a couple of my family members are on, and they're going to be joining or build. I will say again, that was one of my lessons in philanthropy a few years ago. My first school build with Food for the Poor. I would say it was life altering, that experience. So look out out for some information, and certainly request for support from us as well, from our board members on that project, because we're very excited to be going back to Jamaica after a hiatus due to COVID. And building schools, as everyone knows, is so critical and so important to future generations on the island. So listen out for more on that, and we hope that you'll join and support us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.